It's a great question. I think it's been a really interesting experience kind of writing and publishing Simon, which came out in 2015. I wrote it in 2013, came out in 2015, and it feels like I'm writing in a totally different world in some ways, and particularly kind of in the industry, in the publishing industry. I have seen like an explosion of queer stories, still progress needed, like there's still room for growth, but it's been really noticeable that there have been so many more authors telling these stories, different kinds of stories, and the stories are kind of building on everything that came before, which is, it makes it feel like a conversation. And so I am like excited and honored always to be a part of that conversation. I think for me, as somebody who was writing queer stories then and is writing queer stories now, I find that, there are a lot of kind of different shades and nuances to certain experiences, that it's just, there's really the space to explore that maybe in a way that I didn't feel like there was, 10 years ago. And for me personally as well, I am kind of I've been very public, I think, about this, more public than I wanted to be, but I have learned a lot about myself through writing queer stories. So I actually wrote Simon thinking I was straight, and by the time I wrote Imogen, somewhere in the middle there, I realized it was definitely not, and in fact I was missing some very obvious signs which really informed Imogen, obviously. You can even kind of hear it in the title. Very much so, yes. It's so funny. It's a little embarrassing sometimes. I will tell you a little story. So Imogen in the book has a big crush on the actress Clea Duvall, who was in But I'm a Cheerleader. So she played Graham in But I'm a Cheerleader. And Imogen doesn't realize for most of the book that that's a crush. She's got her own logic. She's like, oh yeah, if I were queer, I would like this girl. So about, a couple weeks ago or something, I was scrolling through Instagram and I was like, who's this? I was like, hello. And I'm like, oh, it's literally just Clea Duvall. It's like she posted something on Instagram. I'm like, I've never had an original thought in my life. Like everything I've thought, Imogen's already thought, and like vice versa. Though I definitely poured a lot of myself into that character in particular, and I always do. All of my books get a lot of me, but this girl, she got all the really oblivious, like dodo bird kind of side of me. Like it was, That's a really good question, because I think I've really seen a lot of people discussing this and feeling both ways about this. Like there's a real discourse about this, and both sides of this discourse make some valid points, I think. For me, I think these stories are always necessary. They shouldn't be the only stories. Like we definitely need to make room for all kinds of stories, because it's not what every reader is looking for, and that's not what every reader necessarily needs. But there are always going to be readers who need coming out stories, both because there are always new readers who are, becoming teenagers or even adults or however old, that particular person is when they figure it out. For me, it was late 30s, coming out feels really new when you're doing it, even though so many people have already done it. And also, too, I think, I think we, as a, queer community, need to be very, take care and be mindful about kind of leaving space for people who are closeted, who maybe can't come out, who aren't ready, who don't want to come out, who aren't safe to come out. There's so many different types of experiences, and it looks really different for every person. It's just, it's not just one story. There are so many coming out stories that are all valid and relevant. So I think it is really important to tell more and more of these stories and to continue to tell them, because there are always going to be readers who connect with them, who are, maybe on the brink of figuring that out for themselves. Yeah, I thought about it for sure. I think I'd love to dive into that one day. I don't have any current plans. I haven't started any projects like that at the moment. But I definitely have not ruled out kind of writing for a different age category. So. Yeah, well, first I definitely want to continue writing these. So what's really kind of interesting and frustrating about this industry is, on the bright side, there are more than you realize. There, especially in the last couple of years, in particular, there have been a lot more sapphic books. I know the YA space best, but that it's also true, I think, in romance, at least. However, I think there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect when it comes to, first of all, access. I don't know how available a lot of these books are in translations. And I also think that a lot of times promoting them has been tricky. They haven't had the same virality as the most popular, like, male books. And there are all kinds of reasons that kind of people have discussed as to why that might be. But, it is, it's very frustrating, right? Because it's like, on the one hand, there are more stories than we realize out there, but on the other hand, if you're a reader actively looking for these stories sometimes, and it can be really hard to find them and to even know where to begin looking. This is not a complete solution, but one website that I want to plug that I think is phenomenal is LGBTQ Reads, but it's .com, I think, which is run by an author friend of mine who's brilliant, Dahlia Adler, who also writes a lot of really good sapphic YA too. But Dahlia Adler has kind of curated this website so you can search for different kinds of representation and look for different things, if you're looking for fantasy, YA, fantasy, sapphic or something like that, with and kind of put in what you're looking for. But there's also a section that talks about translations, which books are translated, because that is a really big barrier, I think. Yeah. So. That's a really good question, because it depends, I think, because on the one hand, you want to avoid kind of a situation where these books are siloed. They're only in the corner of the books, the way kind of, particularly when I was growing up, it was like the LGBTQ section of the bookstore, and then these books were not also just in the YA section always, sometimes maybe, but So I think, you do want to make sure that these books have the same visibility as, whatever other books are popular in their category, right? However, I think it is helpful for a lot of readers who are specifically seeking out queer books to be able to, because you can't always tell from the cover or reading the summary on the back. And I think it's good that you can't always tell, because some readers, it's not safe to like bring that book into their home, right?
Yeah.
So it's great that there are all kinds of books in all kinds of spaces in the bookstore. And I think, sometimes I think the most helpful way to do it is to kind of, I guess be involved, even as a consumer, even as a lurker, following social media. There are a lot of really great queer book influencers who are bringing attention to, like, this book is queer, I love this queer book, etc. And you can go to the bookstore and find it in the YA section. Maybe that's how I feel, but I'm open to other opinions for sure. Yeah.
Hi Becky, I love how you have created an amazing universe with your stories. So I was wondering if you can share us a little bit of how is your creative process. Love you.
That is so sweet. So my creative process, it varies from book to book. Like, it has been different, I think, for each book a little bit. But for the most part, I would say what I do first is I am like always trying to get to know the characters. That is like the heart of the story for me. And so in the early stages, I end up doing a ton of just brainstorming and Pinterest and playlists and just trying to like get a feel for, okay, who are these people, right? At least the main central people. And usually I end up kind of pulling together an outline. For me, what that outline tends to look like is kind of like chapter 1, kind of this happens, chapter 2, this happens. So it's not like Roman numeral 1, ABC kind of, it's not like super intricate, but just a kind of a guidepost. I usually change stuff as I go, but just to give me a little bit of direction. And as I am actually writing, so I'm going into like chapter 1, this happens, and I will break it down, and I usually actually start with dialogue. So I will kind of write it out like a screenplay, where it's like this character says this line, and then a little action beat as a guide for myself. So I'm writing that, and then from there I am actually drafting the scene. Because the dialogue definitely helps me get from point A to point B, I found, just for me and the way my little brain works. So
do you think you're like methodic, like you have like, this character, like you describe the character and put like in Pinterest, or you think you're methodic in this creative process?
I try to be, but I'm mostly like chaotic. Every time I'm always looking for, like, this is going to be the thing that makes it click. Like, this time, this new notebook that I buy, this Pinterest board is going to, like, bring it together in my mind. And nothing ever works every time. But, so it's kind of this messy sort of ongoing process of, like, oh, this song, okay, add it to the playlist. I kind of is getting at a feeling, and, oh, this picture, the expression on this person's face in this stock picture, whatever, it's like I think I do a lot of that in the planning stages.
What would be some advice that you could tell that someone that is in her 20s to refine themselves?
Yeah, I think I'm always careful with advice, because really so much of it is very specific to kind of your situation. Like, I don't want to give somebody the advice of like, just come out and like feel free, because like, I don't know if that's safe for you. I don't, so many factors to consider, but in general, kind of some things that I would put out into the universe on that topic are, there's no rush. Like, take all the time you need. You don't owe any answers to anybody. It should be on your terms, on your time frame. And, I guess what I wish I had been able to do kind of as I was figuring myself out, and for me it was in my late 30s, but is to kind of embrace how awkward and funny it is. It's weird. It's like going through puberty again, kind of. You're like, what is happening to me? Like, what are all these changes? My brain has gone rogue. It's it's a really funny, can be joyful time where you're getting to know this new thing about yourself. And that's kind of exciting. And
Hi, Becky. You're such an inspiration for us. And our question is, what's an inspiration for you to create such beautiful characters? Thank you.
Why are all these people so lovely? You guys too. Yeah, I'm like, I think I tend to draw like a lot of inspirations when it comes to the particular characters, and like kind of pulling traits from a lot from myself at different times in my life, a lot from people in my lives. But when I think about an author who has really inspired me, there's an Australian author, Jacqueline Moriarty, who has written, for me, when I kind of discovered her work, I found her realistic contemporary YA, but she also writes fantasy. She writes for adults. She writes for younger kids. She's like a genius. She's amazing. But her writing was like revolutionary to me. It's very voice driven. Like, you feel like you know the characters. They say, they always say, like, they tell their stories in a very particular way. It's all filtered through that particular character's mind, and you can tell from the way it's written. And it didn't click for me until I read her books that those were stylistic choices that you could make. And that's the kind of writing that I think I feel most drawn to. So I, for whatever reason, had internalized this idea that, like, if you're going to be a writer, you need to write, like, beautiful, flowery prose, and it's, kind of a more distant lens. And, I had this idea of, like, what a book should look like, and this really challenged that in a way that ended up being very exciting for me creatively. I got to meet her a couple of years ago, and I cried like a baby. It was it was the most embarrassing thing. I was like, I met actors on Love, Simon. It was really exciting, and my heart was racing. But like when I met Jacqueline Moriarty in Australia, I was like, oh no. I was like sobbing. You want to see me lose my child? I leave soon, so I leave tomorrow. But it's been great. It's been such a fun trip, and everybody's been so wonderful. The food is excellent. It's really been good.
We really hope you enjoyed it, and we also hope to see you sunning here.
I hope so too. I already want to come back. Hi, I'm Becky Albertalli, and I'm here in Guadalajara having an amazing time. And I just want to thank you so much for supporting my books. And I hope you'll pick up Imogen, obviously, if you haven't yet, and I hope you enjoy.